This episode is sponsored by Lookout Games. Episode 22 of the Board Game Geek podcast, where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I'm super excited to be here this morning with Uli Blennemann from Spielworxx. How is it going today, Uli?
I'm fine, Candice, and thank you very much for having me. So, although it's not my morning, it's my late afternoon, but I'm happy being here.
That's true. Yes, we are in different parts of the world. So it is my morning, your evening. But yeah, it's great to have you. What is new with you, Uli?
Yeah, I had a pretty busy first half of July, but actually not working on a specific game. But there was in early July, it's a traditional thing at Mallorca, so in Spain. There is a meeting of about 25 editors, mainly people from German companies. We are meeting there in two fincas, and we are testing games for a full week. So from all companies, we are giving honest feedback, and that was very important. Quite stressful to play that many games, but really nice. And last weekend, I attended a Berlin Brettspiel convention, which is, let's see, for US, for North Americans, it's like Origins or Gen Con. So it's not like it's not a fair like Essen. So they have a program almost around clock. It's a little bit a smaller affair, so about 10,000 people. But that was lovely. We had a small booth with Spielworxx. We sold a little bit. We had excellent talks, but it was way too hot on Saturday. Because here, you probably know this, Candice, in Germany, we do not have that much of air conditioning. So Saturday was stressful, but all in all, it was a wonderful time.
That sounds awesome. Especially like that other convention that you went to where you were playing all the games with different people and kind of giving feedback. That's cool. So I recently started logging plays for the first time. So I am one of the people now who log their plays all the time, and I am already addicted to it. I started, I guess today is Thursday that we're recording. I started a week ago, and I have been toying with the idea of logging plays for a while, but I just never knew when to start. You know, I would miss the start of a year. So this year kind of marks me being into the hobby of modern board games for 5 years now. So I was like, I'm going to start doing it this year. And I was going to start at my local convention in LA, Strategic Con, which is Labor Day, because that's where I met like a lot of my board game friends that are still friends, and that kind of started my whole like network of gaming friends and everything. But then I was like, well, no, why don't I just start at the beginning of the convention season? And I went to Portland Game Collective Con last weekend, so a PGC Con, which is a trick-taking game convention. So I was like, I'm going to start logging my plays for this trip. And, and then I have Gen Con and Strategic Con. So this is the start of me logging plays. But the trick-taking con, do you like trick-taking games, Uli?
Yes. Trick-taking is traditional, especially in Germany, with some very old games. So everybody basically in Germany knows trick-taking. So everybody knows this mechanic.
Cool. Well, I don't know how aware you are of how many new trick-taking games have been coming out, and not even just new ones, just people discovering old ones that are like very innovative. Like there are a lot of games that are doing hybrid kind of things. So I love trick-taking games. And so when I found out last year that Portland Game Collective was hosting this and I couldn't make it, I was like, I really want to make it this year. So I'm glad I got to go and attend. I had such an awesome time. Met so many awesome people, like some people that I've been, connected with on Discord that I've never met in person. And of course, like the vibe was just very fun and chill. I think they said the first year, like last year when they did it in 2022, there were about 40 people who attended. And this year, I think at its peak, there were like 72. I think it's going to continue to grow. But it was still just nice having this kind of like intimate game convention with people just playing all these cool games, showing people different cool games. I got to visit CloudCap Games, which is a shop in Portland that does a lot of importing of Japanese trick takers, making them available to people in the US. And some of the games I have to talk about real quickly, just some of the games I played. Of course, because I log my plays, so now I remember what I played. One of the games is a game called Robotrick. It's a 3-player game where you are playing with a 4th AI opponent. So there's a bot called Droko, and the bot has its own set of rules. So there's a deck of these AI cards that tells you what card they will play. And it's really cool because when you want to win tricks, but every time you win a trick, you take Droko's card. And, so you have to think about, what is Droko throwing into this trick? Do I want that card? Because the twist is, every time you win a card from Droko, you put it face up in front of you. Once you have 3 cards face up in front of you, every other card you take goes face down, and that's going to be negative points. So the only cards you're going to score positively are those 3 face-up cards. And then when Droko wins a trick, every player takes their card face down. So you're losing tricks. So if Droko's going to win, you might want to play something low so you don't have to take too many negative points. But it's just an awesome 3-player trick-taking game. I got kind of lucky that I have a copy of it because Kin Shoba at BGG Spring brought an extra copy from Japan and was kind enough to donate it to me. And I was like, thank you so much. And it's a fantastic game. Played a game called Trick Taking in Black and White, which is a game where it has, I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
No, I haven't.
The cards have a black side, or they're split in half. So it's a black top, white bottom, or whichever way you're holding the card. And both numbers on the card sum to 37. So if there's a white 1, the black is a 36. And then there's also a black 1 with a white 36. And, so the whole deck, it's a must-follow trick-taking game, but you're either leading black or white. Those are the 2 suits, and everybody has those cards. So you have to follow and kind of choose what you're doing. And the hook is you want to win an equal amount of black tricks as white tricks. Because if you win 2 black tricks and 2 white tricks, good job. You just got 4 points because you have 4 tricks. But if, let's say, you won 3 white tricks and only 2 black, and you're not balanced, then you have negative 5 points. So, that one is really good. I played that a couple of times. Played the Barracks Emperors, which is a new GMT game, which is really, really cool. It's kind of based on Time of Crisis. It's designed by the same designers who made Time of Crisis, but it does this hybrid kind of trick-taking area influence thing. And it's really good. I played it 4 players. I played it 2 players. And then I played it 2 versus 2 because there's a variant where you could play teams. But basically what you're doing is you have a board where you have these emperor cards that are either yellow, blue, or red. Red is military, yellow is populist, I think blue is Senate. Just like Time of Crisis, if you've ever played that game. Yeah. And you have influence cards in your hand, and you're trying to surround these emperors. But you can only play cards in spaces that are the same side as your faction. So when an emperor is eventually surrounded, it resolves like a trick where the emperor color is the trump suit. So if I have a yellow influence card around a yellow emperor, and even though there might be a higher blue card, yellow is going to trump that. But that's not where it ends, because every single card has a special ability and can break different rules. And also, like, when you place an influence card, it is likely going to be placed such that it's also going to help or hurt other players because of the way the board is spaced out. So it's really cool. I'm going to be doing a little write up about this convention in BGG News, which will be dropping the same day that this episode drops. So I'll probably have like a little more info on that, but I would highly recommend checking that one out. And then just to call out a few more, just to be quick, there's a game called Le Plateau. I think I might have mentioned it after I went to BGG Spring. I played it. It mixes trick taking with abstract strategy, but it has this bidding system where you kind of shift partnerships throughout the game. Very, very cool. Touchdown Heroes and Savage Bowl, sports kind of themed games, but like very interesting. Inside Job. Have you heard of Inside Job or tried it?
Mm-hmm. No, not tried, but heard of it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's a hidden roles, like one, you have all players except one are a bad person. You don't know who it is. And you're doing kind of like The Crew. You're kind of like trying to win these like objectives, these missions. But one person may be sabotaging it. And then it has all these crazy roles that you can kind of integrate. So I do have a new episode of Cardboard Creations coming out soon where I've interviewed Tanner Simmons, the designer, and it's actually really fascinating to see how that game kind of originated. Have you ever played Diamonds?
Is this the older Stronghold games? Yes, I've played that one. Yes.
Yeah, so I had some friends teach me Diamonds, which I had heard of, but I had never tried. And yeah, that was really cool. And I was like, I see why that's still in print and getting printed. You're like playing cards to kind of win these diamonds, and some of them you can put behind your screen, which you'll definitely score, but other ones that are placed in front of your screen, different players could potentially steal from you. And I like that. I thought that was a great game. Yeah, and then I also played some, so those are more like trick taking games, but I also played some climbing shedding games that were cool. Have you heard of Bridge City Poker or 535?
No, I do not. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So these are two games that were published by the Portland Game Collective. And so I was really excited to be able to like buy them while I was in Portland at their convention, and also had the opportunity to play both of them while I was there. But they're really good. Like, they're those shedding games where you are trying to get rid of your hand of cards first. Bridge City Poker has all these crazy powers that you can throw in these ability cards that you can kind of mix into it. And then 535 was interesting because you could not necessarily just have to like beat a combination on the table, but you could like add one card to a combination, and it had some like really interesting like different things happening, even though it's like following that same like, hey, I need to get rid of my hand of cards. But yeah, and then I played Bacon, which is a new one coming from, I think, All Play, where it's a 3 versus 3 team shedding game. So people who like teach you would probably like this game. It was really fun. I think we only played a round. And then last but not least, I'll just mention I played a couple non-trick taking games too. I got in some dual gauge with Jonathan Cox from John Gets Games, and we played the Denmark map of dual gauge for the first time. That was really wild. Have you played dual gauge before?
No, I have not. But I know the game. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So each map just kind of changes up the rules. And in this one, you are kind of incentivized to put out stations on the map. Whereas like some of the maps, you don't want to put stations out, or, it doesn't make sense for the stock market manipulation. But that was fun. I played an Infamous Traffic for the first time. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
We had such a wonky game because we were all sort of new. and we had some weird things happen with die rolls, and we were like talking a lot, but so fascinating. Like, I cannot wait to play that one again.
Yeah, it may be actually you know this. It's very difficult to determine your favorite game among all these. It's depending on time of the day,
Right.
of group of people. But this may be my number one game for 4 and 5 people, because I would not play it with 2 or 3 actually, but with
Right.
4 or 5, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Actually, Cole is I'm a huge fanboy. So.
And I'm a fangirl of Cole really also. Yeah, I thought, I picked up I scored a copy of this almost a year ago, and I just haven't gotten it to the table. So I was like, I'm bringing it. It's thin. It'll, fit my suitcase, and I want to play this game. And it's so cool. And now I'm actually reading a book called Imperial Twilight, which is on the opium wars in China and everything. And it's like, it's a fascinating topic, and the gameplay is just like so interesting. I can't wait to see what they do with, when they make the second edition of it, like they did with John Company and Pax Pamir. So
yeah. I agree 100%. I just hear, and I've told this to Drew and Cole, but I will restate it here publicly. I hope that the original and infamous traffic as we see it, of course, with updated rules and graphics, stays. Yeah, there can be, of course, if you revisit a topic, you will change some things, but I hope that's the original one, which is brutal in a way, which is maybe unfair, but that it stays plus something new. So that would be my wish. But yeah, well,
I like that idea too. So you have my vote for that. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with it, and yeah, hopefully not too far off what it is, because it's pretty awesome, I think. And then I played 2 riveting games of Blood on the Clocktower. Have you tried that one at all?
Not at all, but it's high on my list to play that one. Yeah,
I love it. I think every single time I played it, I probably like half a dozen times, maybe 8 times now. I just I walk away with like so many stories, and you're just talking about it for the next couple of days. Like, oh, remember this happened, remember that happened. But yeah, we ended up playing 2 games, and I love playing with new players too. So we had a couple new players in, we had a couple experienced players. At one point I won this, my team won the second game, and we were the bad team. So that was exciting, because I was like the imp. And I always hate being on the bad team, because I feel like I'm nervous about it, but somehow it worked out. But anyway, played a lot of card games, had a wonderful time. I left the convention just kind of in like, do I even need to play board games anymore? Because I'm craving trick taking games. I'm craving shedding games. Like, they're just, there's so much depth in them. They play so quickly. They're small. But I do still love board games.
Yeah, but it's always amazing what designers come up with just a deck of cards or 2 decks of cards. It's really wonderful, and often they fit various player counts very well. There are trick takers for 3 people, for 2, for 4, for 5. Although I also like the hybrids. You mentioned the Barracks Emperor game.
Barracks
so you're
Emperors,
using trick taking, or the game from Per Sylvester. What's the name?
Oh, Brian Boru.
Yes. So trick taking is just an element. So it's amazing to see designers using trick taking either alone as the game, or as a tool for something else. It's wonderful.
I totally agree. And speaking of card games, today we're going to talk about card-driven games, or CDGs as they're called. We're going to talk about what they're all about, what makes them special, and of course, we'll mention some of our favorite CDGs. over the past few years, I've definitely discovered not only trick-taking games, but I just love card games. Like, I love LCGs. I love Flesh and Blood. Like, there's something about like what you can do with a hand of cards that, is just like really exciting to me. And I love board games that use cards as like an integral part. So I love CDGs.
Yeah, me too. So, Candice, I totally understand. And it may be my favorite gaming mechanic, CDGs. And speaking of fanboys, so I'm a fanboy of Cole, but I'm also a fanboy of Mark Herman. And when he invented the genre in the early 90s, you need to know at that time, I was a wargamer, but it was mainly, not 100%, but mainly hex and counter. So he really, with this genre, in my opinion, at least, he reinvented wargaming and made it more attractive for me, for more people. And that, I think, was a very, very important time. And I think also, of course, it's not a CDG. Maybe we talk later about this briefly. Coin series was also inspired by CDGs because you're putting info and historical events on
the cards. Yeah, and it's kind of driving the whole game.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Yeah, Mark Herman. Woo. Awesome.
Yeah. What a person.
Yeah. Great guy, amazing designer. But before we start talking about card-driven games, I'd love to hear about what you've been playing lately, Uli. So let's jump into fresh plays.
Yeah, a game that I played recently, even I think I played it on Tuesday, is Lantern Freedom, which is released or was released this year by Blue Panther. The designer is Alex Knight, and it's a three-player game, 1 to 3 player game, but basically it's a three-player game on the Spanish Civil War. Yes, there have been quite a few Spanish Civil War games in the last 5 or 6 years, but this one is different. So one player isn't the fascists, but all 3 players are fighting Spanish fascism. So one player is a moderate, one player is an anarchist, one player is a communist. And if the fascists win in this game, then everybody has lost. But if we stop the fascist victory in the Civil War, then at the end, one of the 3 players will win. So you constantly also look to be better than your 2 team players because your agenda, all 3 agendas, are different. Of course, anarchists are different than moderates. And the fascists are represented by cards. In a way, it's also card-driven, or it is a card-driven game because you have a hand of cards and can play a card for event and or action points and icons. So it's a wonderful game with really a lot of history. So this is right up my alley. So I have to congratulate Alex Knight, maybe the best game I've played this year.
Wow, awesome. I have Land and Freedom, by the way. I almost played it a month ago, but it didn't work out, and I've still been wanting to play it. And actually, I mentioned, I think on the last episode, I ended up playing Imperial Struggle when my coin game got canceled. And then I thought we were going to have a 3-player game and we were going to play this, but then another person canceled. So I still haven't played Land and Freedom, but that everybody I know that I've heard that has played it has said wonderful things about it. It sounds very fascinating. And I love that it has that whole like, hey, we need to work together to do this, but I'm going to try to push ahead of you anyway. Like that dynamic sounds so fun. And of course, like you mentioned, there are like, probably several games on the Spanish Civil War, but I don't think I know much about it. And I don't know that I've played any of them yet. So I'm excited to kind of, learn about that a bit.
Yeah, and what I also found fascinating is, so yeah, I know a little bit about the Spanish Civil War, but not all these details.
Ah,
And
that's cool.
there is, on each card there is flavor text, and I've seen card titles, I've seen characters I've never heard before of. So it also gives you a lot of history. And if you think CDGs have to be very complex, not in this case. The rules are actually brief and pretty well written, or scratch that pretty, they are well written. And so it's really a wonderful experience. So great game, and I have to congratulate Alex here. So oh,
Cool.
wow.
Okay, I'm gonna push that up on my my queue of long queue of games I need to play still.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of long queue of games I need to play still, I recently played a game that I received at Essen last year in 2022. And it was something like, I don't know, a month after I got back, I was about to play it, but then I didn't. And games are coming in. It's just so many games to play. And then sometimes just some kind of get lost in the shuffle. But I always find them. And, there's a time to bring them out. But I played Peak Oil Profiteer. And this is a game from 2022. Again, it came out at Essen last year, designed by Tobias Gorbent and Heiko Gunther. And it's published by Two Tomatoes Games. It plays with 1 to 5 players. And I believe it was Heiko handed me a copy of this game at Essen. I was like wandering around and he bumped into me. He's like, "Oh, like, I think you're going to like this game. Here you go." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." But it was like literally in passing. So I believe that was Heiko. So thank you, Heiko. If it was Tobias, thank you, Tobias. But anyway, this is a kind of a different feeling game, but it's based on a universe of another game that I think both of these guys designed called Peak Oil, which was in 2017. And it's kind of this like, it's a tactical game and it has a bit of area control and a lot of player interaction. And it's centered around a simultaneous, like, card driven action selection. So it's not like a card driven game in the sense of what we're going to be talking about. But it sort of is a card. It's more like similar to Mission Red Planet, if you've ever played that, where
Yes. Mm-hmm.
yeah, where everybody's gonna pick a card and then resolve the card and take an action. But in this game, each player is a top exec for an oil company, and your goal is to make the most money. So the board is like a map that's split into like different regions, and there are 3 warring factions. So this is like, you and I know both love Pax Pamir, and I just love games where it's like even like a War of Whispers, where there's area control happening, but nobody controls, we all maybe can control different factions at different points. And that's what this game is kind of all about. Like, so there are these 3 warring factions. We're oil companies. We're trying to make money. It's a little like, it's almost a little like silly. Like, I love this rule book has some good humor in it. There's corruption. So at the beginning of the game, there's a corruption track that starts at 94, level 94, but I don't know if it's like 94% corrupt. And the game will end when that track hits 100. And the other thing is, on the right side of the board, there's this like track where you keep track of troop cubes. So they're little cubes of 3 different colors representing the different factions. And a lot of the pricing and the costs in the game are related to how many troop cubes are on the track versus on the map. So a cube is either on this track or it's on in a region on the map. So each round, first you're going to reveal like a contingency card, and it's either going to be an event or it's going to be like a consultant. And the event is one of the ways the corruption is going to tick up. That's like the timer for the game. But then everybody like secretly picks which action card they want and put it face down in front of them. And then you don't simultaneously reveal. Instead, you go through each action. So we say action number 1, which is networking. So anybody who played a networking card will then flip their card. And then the turn order for if multiple people picked, a certain action is on the back of the card that's on the top of the contingency deck. So there's a turn order that like kind of shifts depending on which card is on top of the stack, which is cool. And then you take your actions. So you just like go through each action, and that's like every round kind of the flow of the game. And like one of the actions is networking, which lets you draw a blackmail card and you can bribe a leader. You have these poker chips that are leaders. And for certain actions, you need a leader for that particular faction to actually take the action. So when you bribe a leader, there are some that are going to be like public that you could just pay a certain amount of money. And again, the amount of money you pay is based on the troop level of that faction. But if you have the leader that I want, Uli, I have to pay the bank that amount of money, and I have to pay you that amount of money. And then I can take that leader, and now maybe I can do some action with that faction.
Interesting.
The other thing is you can sell weapons, so you have to control a leader, and then you'll get a certain amount of money, again based on wherever the troop cube is. There's like a little like a table that tells you how much money you'll get, and it varies depending on how many troops are out on the map versus on the track. So that's a way to get money. But the other thing that happens when you do that is you're going to add a troop to the board, and then you're going to move it somewhere, which might cause it to go to war with another faction. But it's very simple. One cube, both cubes kill each other kind of thing. So both cubes go away when you end up moving into a space with a different faction. So it's very simple. You can buy drilling rights to put one of your drilling towers in a space that has a drill. Again, you need to have, you have to control the leader to do that. But once you have a drilling tower, then you can sell the oil, which is the way you make the most money in this game. And you have to be able to trace a path, a connection back to a port. So then the last action you could do is contingency, which is whatever card is on the top, like whether it's a consultant or the event, you can trigger that thing. Consultants give you special abilities. So there's a lot of player interaction, and it's very tactical. People are taking leaders from each other. There are blackmail cards that you can play at the start of your turn. So if I have, let's say you have the military leader for the blue faction, and I have that card in my hand, I play it down, and I say, Uli, I've blackmailed that leader. Now they're on my side. And then if you happen to have that the same leader in your hand of blackmail cards, you can stop me by playing the card. So there's a little of that. But besides having the leaders to kind of do leader abilities, they also give you benefits on a couple of the actions. Like being a leader, I forget the two different types of leaders, but like one of them, when somebody delivers oil or sells oil, if you sell through a port where they have the leader, they get a cut of the money. So there's all sorts of craziness. I played this game with four players, and we had a great time. And it was like, it feels different. Like some of the things I've just explained probably sound like, oh, maybe that's from this game, that's from that game. But there's something about it that felt a little different, and it was definitely also suspenseful when you're picking your action card. You're looking at that turn order, because sometimes turn order is very important when you're trying to place a little drilling rig. There might be only one space available depending on the leader that you have and everything. So that was really good. And I also just love the simplicity of how the troop track impacts everything, like the amount of money you get when you sell weapons or sell oil, and the amount of money that you spend when you do certain things. And then the special abilities on the consultant cards are fun. Like I had one that let me, before I selected my action card, I could look at one of my opponent's action cards. So so that was helpful. So so that's Peak Oil Profiteer. And have you ever seen that one or heard of it?
Heard of it? Yes, never seen of it. Never seen it, or obviously not played it. But anything by Heiko, is interesting in my opinion. So I'll need to check it out.
Yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out. And now that when you play that first game and you like learn a bit about the game, I'm excited to see how the next game goes now that we all like understand, or at least I do. So when I teach it to people in the future, I could say, "Hey, these are some things you need to think about," But yep, that is Peak Oil Profiteer. What else have you been playing lately?
Yeah, I stay with card-driven games here. So I played
Nice.
recently a couple of times. I played Votes for Women by the wonderful Tori
Oh
Brown,
yeah.
and published by the wonderful Fourth Circle game. I think this is
Yeah.
a company that people should look into. So
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Bertram does amazing work. Shores of Tripoli. Now I think they had a Kickstarter for Halls of Montezuma. And Votes for Women is for 1 to 4 players. It was released, I think, in 22. Hopefully, this is correct. Maybe this year. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure if it's last year
yeah, I
or
don't
this
remember if it
year.
was this year or last year either, or like the end of last year. I think it was this
It
year.
could be. Yeah, it could be this year. Yeah. And it's about a topic I do not or I did not know a lot about. So it's a card-driven game covering the American women's suffrage movement from 1848 to 1920. And over here in Europe, what you learn is about the movement in Great Britain. Yeah, you learn
Yeah,
this a
yeah.
little bit in school, but basically nothing about the movement in the US. So I found this fascinating. And again, what I also found outstanding is that Fourth Circle Games had um, historical papers included there, facsimiles of them. So it really added to the flavor. And of course, card driven games with the illustrations on the cards, with a little bit of flavor text. So they really draw you into the topic. Game wise, I think the design origins is from 1960, from the game that was first published by Z-Man Games and now by GMT Games, Making of a President, 1960 Making of a President. It's, for, I said, 1 to 4 players, but it's basically a two-player contest here. And but Tori and Fourth Circle, they have added some things to it. First, it's quicker and a little bit simpler than 1960, plays faster, and they have added more random elements to it via 4-sided dice, 6-sided dice, 8-sided dice. But
Mm-hmm.
do not fear now, it is a luck based die rolling festival. No, but for some actions, you are using these dice, and I think it works really wonderfully. And you learn a lot. It's exciting gameplay, and the playing time, once you know the mechanics, it's not a lot more, a little bit more than 60 minutes probably. So wonderful production, wonderful design.
I completely agree. Yeah, I actually did an episode earlier this year with Mandy Hutchinson where we talked about this game. And yeah, it's just so well done. And I totally agree with like Fort Circle Games is crushing it.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely looking forward to the Halls of Montezuma and like, anything else coming down the pike from them.
Yeah.
So that is Votes for Women. Another game. I did not stick with card driven games for my fresh plays, although, yeah, but a card related game. I recently played Moonrakers for the first time. This is a 2020 release from Max Anderson, Zach Dixon, and Austin Harrison, and it's published by 4 Games or IV Games. I'm assuming it's Roman numeral to be 4 games, but it plays with 1 to 5 players. And this game is so how this fell into my radar because I think like still a lot of people don't know about Moonrakers until now. But at some point in 2022, somebody posted on Twitter and they were talking about like their top 5 or top 10 games of something that they played last year or something or another. And I knew every game on their list except Moonrakers. So I was like, go to BGG, look up Moonrakers. And I saw deck building and negotiation. And I was like, heck yeah, That's my jam. I know it already. So I reached out to them for a review copy, and they were kind enough to send me one so I could check it out, and finally got it to the table a few nights ago. And I discovered, spoiler alert, it's just as awesome as it sounds if you're like me and you like deck building and or negotiation games. So this is a deck building game where we are a loose band of mercenaries called the Moonrakers, and it's in this sci-fi setting. We each have our own little ship player boards, but we're essentially racing to get to 10 prestige points to become the new leader of the Moonrakers. And everyone starts with the same deck of action cards, which is, a la most deck building games. Everybody has the same starting deck. And over the course of the game, you're going to add new cards to your deck. You're going to trash cards from your deck. So you're kind of manipulating and customizing your deck as you do in deck builders. Some of the different types of action cards in this game are thrusters that let you draw cards. There are shields that are going to block hazards that you have to deal with. There are the weapon cards that do damage that's just needed for certain contracts, which I'll get into in a second. And then there are reactors that give you extra action points because each card you play is an action. And then there are crew cards. Nobody starts with any crew cards, but crew cards are cards that you can buy for your deck that are going to give you special abilities, and they're super cool. The main part of this game or aspect of this game is that you are going to be trying to complete these contracts. And contracts, there are going to be 8 of them face up that on your turn, you'll be the mission leader. You get to choose one of those contracts. And, if you can fulfill the contract on your own, go for it. Like, that's great because then you get all the rewards. But in most cases, especially early in the game, you have to work with other players. So you are going to be negotiating. Hey, Uli, are you able to put in 2 thrusters? Because if you can go in with me on this, I'm willing to give you like $2 of the rewards and 1 victory point. And then I'll take 2 victory points and the free card. Is that cool? So you're negotiating a contract with, and you could do it with multiple players. So not just one player, you could do it by yourself. But each of the cards, the contract cards, each have a hazard value of 0 to 4. And if there is a hazard value of 1 to 4, you are going to roll that many hazard dice. And so that is also kind of negotiable in your contract negotiations. Like, hey, Uli, if I'm giving you a point and $2 for this, can you roll both of the hazard dice? So you're deciding who's going to roll, then you're going to eventually roll. But these contract cards have a certain amount of different types of action cards you need to play in order to pass the contract or fulfill the contract. So let's say Uli and I go in, we're like, yeah, you can contribute that. I know what I have and I can do. And then we roll the hazard dice. Well, Uli rolls the ones because I didn't want any this time.
Yeah.
And the hazard dice have 2 blank sides, 2 sides that have 1 hazard icon, and then 2 sides that have 2 hazard icons. So you rolling 2 dice, you could have up to maybe 4 hazards you have to deal with. And I mentioned there were shield cards. So for each shield card you play, it blocks a hazard. But otherwise, hazards are going to give you minus victory points, minus prestige. So they're not good. You want to make sure you play some shields to protect yourself if you have to roll the die. But when you go to fulfill the contract, whoever the mission leader is decides, I could say, I'll go first, Uli, or I could say, you go first, or I could say, I'll go play a couple cards, then you go, you can, it's flexible. But what happens when it's your turn, let's say I go, every single action card you play is an action, costs you an action, and we only get 1 action. So often your first action card is going to be a reactor because playing that gives you 2 actions. So now I spent my first action. Now I have 2 actions. Cool. So now I maybe play that 1 thruster that we needed for the objective. And reactors are sometimes, needed for the contracts. And then you're trying to balance out the cards in your hand, the amount of actions you have to also achieve whatever the contract is. And that's why you have to usually negotiate with people because you only have a certain amount of actions. You only have a certain amount of cards in your hands. But as you play the game, you can get ship upgrades and you get these crew cards, and they're going to help you do things more efficiently and more effectively. And it's super cool. And then probably the more exciting part about this game, since it's a race to 10 prestige points, is that everybody starts the game with 2 objectives. So you have secret objectives in this game, and you can, at the end of any player's turn, say, haha, I did this objective, I get a point. And on your turn, if you do not want to get attempt a contract, you can just stay at base, and that's a way to get more objective cards by taking stay at base, like kind of like, I think you get $1 or $2 or something like that. But yeah, it's really cool. It's fun to see like people negotiating like, hey, maybe right now I mostly care about money. Hey, Uli, you take the victory point. Just give me $5 on this, you know? And like, and then you can also screw people over. So you could say, you're sold. Like, yeah, you could totally say like, hey, yeah, Candice, I have 2 reactors and a thruster, so I can go in with you. And then it could be close towards the end of the game, and you're like, you're not going to help me. So then you're like, you're choosing not, or you could play dumb, like, oh, I thought I had 2, but you know. So there's all sorts of like fun stuff you could do with that. So have you ever heard of Moonrakers, or have you played it?
No, I have not played it, but now I need to play it because I think this could be a game for me, especially. Well, what is playing time, Candice? And how many players you think is best? Is it 4 to 5? Is it good with 3? What do you think?
So that's a good question. So according to the BGG community, it's best at 4. And considering I played it with 5, and it was, I would probably agree, even though I haven't tried it at 4 yet, like 5 was a bit much in terms of the negotiations. Like in the rules, they say, hey, you can put a timer on to make sure no one, because it can go forever. You know, you start making a deal with 2 people, then all of a sudden one person's like, I'll do that for 1 point less. And then you're like, okay, now I'm considering that deal with this person. So it can kind of like go on. But I think our 5-player game with newbies took about 2 hours. So I could see it being like an 1.5 to 2 hour game. Probably will shine at 4 players, because I think 3 players, I think 4 players will just present more negotiation, like interesting negotiation options. But it's very light, like a quick teach. I want a quick teach, especially if anybody's ever played a deck building game. It's very straightforward. But yeah, then the discussions, like it almost like reminded me of like Sidereal Confluence or something, like the action and excitement every time it got around, how people were in terms of like, if you think of a game like Twilight Imperium, when somebody's ahead, it's like, oh, I'm not going to work with them because they are, 2 points ahead of everyone and all that stuff. Like, I think we have similar tastes in games, so I think you would like this game a lot.
Yeah, I already wrote the title down here, so I have to check it out.
Cool. And then there are also like a couple expansions that I think were on Kickstarter maybe last year for it, but there's like and they're sort of mini expansions. But Binding Ties let you like track your reputation with the other factions, and I think that will impact resolving contracts somehow. Like, hey, Uli and I have a good reputation with each other, but I don't know exactly how it works, but I was like, that sounds interesting. There's another one that adds like more cards, like more ship parts and crew cards. And I think it adds these like advanced action cards. So again, deck building games, yes, we love more cards, more interesting card play. So that's what it sounds like. That one's called Overload. And then there's a Nomad one, which kind of adds a board where you are moving your ship into different sectors. And this changes up, I believe, the way the contracts work, where if you go to certain sectors, you'll find contracts that better fit your strengths or something like that. I don't know. It sounds cool. So I'm glad I finally played Moonrakers, and we had a great time with it. And this is one I will definitely play more. So that is Moonrakers.
Sounds very good. Yeah.
And now a word from our sponsor. Summer is in full swing, which means vacation season. Whether you're traveling with family or friends, planning a big trip or small getaway, or if you're lacking inspiration on where to go, I've got you covered. Lookout Games is taking you to Ireland this summer. Yes, the rolling hills of Ireland is where we gather 2 to 5 players in Tipperary, an easy-peasy tile-laying game for ages 8 and up that comes with lots of polyominoes and fun. In this cheerful family game, players create their perfect idea of an Irish country by laying out landscape tiles. The linchpin is a magical stone circle that decides which of the tiles you can choose from. If you combine your tiles skillfully, you'll eagerly collect sheep, towers, and whiskey for more victory points. With a travel time of about 30 minutes, you'll find yourself playing it again and again this summer. If you're into polyominoes and tile-laying games, head over to your friendly local game store and book yourself a tour to Tipperary. You won't regret it. You've been playing card-driven games longer than me. What would you say, how would you define a card-driven game for people who aren't familiar with the mechanism?
Yeah, I think first, I think that the title card-driven games says what it's about. So games, normally board games or games which at least have a track that are using cards to drive the game to as the engine of the game. And so one thing that I love about card-driven games is that they use this traditional mechanic that a player gets normally a hand of cards, and that they play one card at a time. So according to their preferences. In card-driven games, normally a card can be played for at least 2 different things. So it could be action points, could be an event. Sometimes they have up to 4 or 5 different means for playing. So that it's also exciting. Of course, this also means that sometimes this can be quite complex, because we know that if you have several cards in your hand, even if they are not multi-purpose cards, that it's difficult to determine which card to play now or which card to keep. But then here you have the additional complexity. Do I play it for the event, or do I play it for action points? Makes it more complex, but also, in my opinion, at least more exciting.
Yes.
And of course, another thing is you can script things or historical things very well, events. For example, in Washington's War, also in We the People, there is a card called Declaration of Independence. And of course, in this conflict, this Declaration of Independence has to happen to drive the game.
Right.
But so there is this event included, but you do not know when it is played. So during the game. So you can script a game according to your preferences. So that I like a lot. And of course, these events, all these historical persona or events, they can be with a nice illustration on a card, and this allows immediately that you more immersion, that you're drawn into the game.
Yeah.
And sometimes it makes the quite complex games a little bit easier, because in a standard game, you would have an exception. If this is happening, rule point 5.7.5, a exception. If this is happening, we are doing this. And here it's on the card. So you are reading this brief little rule on the card. Do not have to read it in advance. Play the card. So these are my main things. And of course, you can include in a historical game political events, which is also interesting to my mind.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Again, we have similar taste. I love those tough and awesome hand management decisions of, thinking about which card should I play and when do I play this card? Do I hold this on? And then how do I use this card at whatever time I think I should play it? And often these games, a lot of these, almost all of these games are probably that we'll mention are historically based or war games. but not in all cases.
Right.
Which is exciting because I think, this was something that started with We the People, which is a war game. And I think we're starting to slowly see like more non-war games kind of use this mechanism because it's just like all, like Uli said, like the rules, you take the rules, you decrease the size of the rule book, and you're putting the rules, these small bites on the cards that are in your hand. And often these games are 2 players, but not always. And usually there are certain cards for each side, and then maybe some neutral cards, because yes, the cards will have events, but then they'll also have an action point value, which is often referred to as operations if it's a more war game and everything. But yeah, I guess like again, We the People, Mark Herman kind of originated this.
Again, that Mark Herman, he's actually the inventor of this, and I discovered the game I think 93 or 94. It was one of the last games by Avalon Hill before they were bought by Hasbro, and and that was, in my opinion, at least a restart of the wargaming hobby. So wonderful game. And because you mentioned there are normally several card decks or neutral card sets, and the first few CDGs had a single card deck. So everybody drew from a single card deck, and that worked very nicely, made it a little bit easier, but it also resulted in some of the events cannot be used by the player drawing it. So it has advantages and disadvantages.
Sure.
But in this game, I think what I love in We the People, and also in the re-implementation, it's basically a redesign, Washington's War by GMT in 2010, which actually was the first game that Spielworxx published in 2010, just a German edition of this.
Oh, cool.
Spielworxx started with Washington's War because I loved that game and
cool.
the genre so much. So I'm really attached to it. But what is very nice that, yes, it's a war game, but winning the hearts and minds of the people is actually more important in this game by political means. There will be campaigns, there will be a few important battles, but this is more important. And again, I'm a fanboy of Mark Herman.
I still have not played Washington's War, if you can believe that. I need to try it.
So many games and so little time, Candice. But what is good with Washington's War also is that the playing time is fairly short, and the rules for a CDG are quite compact. So you will, with your experience, you will be in no time you'll be in the game.
Yeah, I'm excited to try that one. And again, like not every game that is a CDG is a war game. A lot of them are still historically based, but not all of them. But you mentioned Votes for Women already. That's historically based, but that's not a war game. There's 1960 and Making the President, which is a similar, election kind of political struggle.
Yeah, what is interesting, it's also a couple of years old, I think 6, 7, 8 years old. It's Forged in Steel. It's a card-driven game that is about city building, historical city building. And although if you play the game, which I like, I do not love it, but I like it, it's more about, it feels like more city deconstruction, because you're always fighting against the buildings of the other players and try to remodel.
Gotcha.
But that is a very interesting design, and of course a game by the wonderful Dan Bullock, Motherland Without, North Korea in Crisis and Cold War, 1998, about North Korea. One player is playing the West, the other player is playing North Korea, and you try to also get defectors out of the country. Wonderful game by Compass Games, and of course Some people say Twilight Struggle is a war game. I'd say it's a political
Yeah, I
game
agree.
about the Cold War by Jason Matthews. We don't have to say too much about it because it was for years. It was number one at PGG. So very important game. And I think what you mentioned earlier is really very, very important. CDGs do not have to be war games or historical games. Any game basically could be a CDG. I have a feeling that a lot of the designers who are normally designing Euro-type games are a little bit reluctant because, yeah, CDGs are a nightmare to test, the interaction of the cards, and often CDGs are two-player games. And so I see a certain reluctance here, but I'd love to see more designers pick up CDGs or using the CDG mechanics for anything, not only for, it could be city building, it could be trading, anything is doable because playing a card at a time for certain effects is a traditional gaming mechanic.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned Forged in Steel because my friend Ben Mendelker has Forged in Steel and he's been wanting to show it to me. And I was like, what? A city building game that's a card driven game? Yes, sign me up. And Dan Bullock, No Motherland Without is excellent.
Yes.
Didn't love the components, some of the graphic design choices, and I know that's not under
it's red. The game is red, I think. So I think basically everything, the board, all the playing pieces, everything is red. And but that's not under his control. And if you actually play the game after a while, it adds to the experience. Actually,
it is a fantastic game, and I also tried. He did. Was it 1979?
Raid on Iran, right?
Revolution Iran or something. That one I played also, and I thought that had some interesting things happening. Like I need to revisit that one. But yeah, that's I'm Dan Bullock is on my radar.
And he's also a very nice fellow. I never met him personally, but we Skyped a few times. Cool. Very nice fellow, in my opinion. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's jump into. We already talked about a bunch of games, but let's go into some of our favorite games. And as usual, like I kind of shy away from doing top fives and stuff because it's hard. These are just 5 games that we both really like that are in this genre. And mine are in no particular order. I don't know about you.
I listed them a little bit in order from 5 to 1, but actually, as I said before, with an infamous traffic, next week's list could be already a little bit different.
Right.
And Land and Freedom, which I mentioned earlier, could be in this top 5 list, whatever that is, could be in there soon too, if I played a little bit more often. So it's not that important. Yeah.
Well, Uli, first, I did cheat, and I do have a couple honorable mentions. Do you have any?
Yes, I have honorable mentions, which I'd like to mention at the end. Is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that too then.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, go ahead.
So my number 5 game with all these caveats now is Path of Glory. It was released in 1999. Designer is Ted Racer and published by GMT Games. It's a 2-player game. And actually, I have a love and hate relationship with this game. I've played it a lot. And Ted was one of the first, maybe the first designer who split up the decks. So there was a deck for the Central Powers, or there is a deck for the Central Powers and for the Entente. And the player's deck is even divided into early war periods, center, medium, and then late war decks. So, which allows for more scripting, which I like a lot. I think as a game, it's terrific. Each and every card play is important. do I play it for the action or the operations or for the event? So fantastic. I just think it's a bad simulation of World War One. It's really bad. There are and I know a little bit about the First World War, and often I think, no, this can't be true. Yes, it's true. But
Gotcha.
I still like the game a lot. And I know here in Germany people who've played it more than 200 times. And
Wow.
it's not a game that you can play in 20 minutes. It needs a couple of hours. If I'm the opponent, it's faster because they will always beat me. So playing time is shorter, but it's a fantastic game with this caveat. I don't think it's a good simulation, but still, if you
Gotcha.
haven't played it, give it a try.
I will give it a try because I have Paths of Glory, but I just haven't. I haven't had an opportunity to play it yet. But I know it's like a classic, and people love it, and I definitely want to try it at some point. So my number 5 game that I picked, even though we just kind of talked about, we don't really need to talk about it too much. But I picked Twilight Struggle Red Sea, just because I'm like I do love Twilight Struggle, and I'm mentioning Twilight Struggle Red Sea because it's a shorter version. It's designed by Jason Matthews, came out this year, I think, or it might be like Votes for Women. Maybe it was like the end of last year. I don't know, but I think it's a tense, card-driven, political, and historical strategy game. You can play it solo with Red Sea, but it's kind of designed as a 2-player kind of tug of war struggle. It kind of set the path for a lot of these kind of tug of war CDGs that are more like politically based. And I think it's still crushes it. And I love that with the Twilight Struggle Red Sea that you can kind of condense it down into a much shorter package. Because like the first time I played Twilight Struggle, I loved it, but it's just like I think it ran like 4 hours or so, and it's not something I can get to the table often, especially because I have so many games that are like that length. So I'm trying to like give them all some love. So it's just nice that like Twilight Struggle Red Sea, you can get that Twilight Struggle feel, but in a much shorter play time. Also, I think it's really cool that it can teach players Twilight Struggle. If you've ever been intimidated by Twilight Struggle, like learn this game, and then you know how to play Twilight Struggle if you want something that's a little bit of a longer, beefier experience. But yeah, this is like it's a game with a shared deck of cards, and when you play your opponent's event, they get to trigger it. So that's another thing that's going through your head is like when do I play this card? Or maybe I space race it so that I can just bury it, but you can only do that once per round. So lots of like really interesting decisions, lots of tension. And I just I love it. So I had to mention it. So I will say Twilight Struggle Red Sea.
Yeah, and just one more sense. I haven't seen that game at all here, so it is definitely already in Germany, but I haven't seen it, and I will for 100%. I'll check it out, and especially what you mentioned here, the space race thing, that you have a once per turn, once per game round opportunity to get rid of one of the opponent's events. I like this mechanic. So I think this is really, really clever. Yeah, my next game is number 4. It's Clash of Monarchs, released in 2008 by designers Bob Kalinowski, and again is published by GMT Games, and it's for 2 to 4 players. And it's about the 7 Years' War in Europe, so 1756 to 63. And it's a somewhat older game. And when you were mentioning it's often difficult to get games to the table, this is definitely a candidate that you won't get often to the table. Actually, I only played 2 campaign games of it over all the years, and both by Vassal, and not because the playing time for the full campaign is probably at least 10 hours. So you have to split it off. You have to split it off into manageable bytes, and we played it with 4 people. So you can have one player as Prussia, one player as England, and then the other players are Austria and France, and later Russia is also played by France. And this gives you also a nice personality game on the table with 4 people. I think the game is not that well developed, so you have some errata there and some rules holes, but the experience is still wonderful. It's also a little bit too much on the complex side for my tastes nowadays. So battles can be really, really involved. You can play additional cards, and there are various outcomes. Leaders can die or be wounded, but still, it's a great game in my opinion. I think it's the best on the 7 Years' War, which is a fascinating period, and yeah, probably the only 7 Years' War game that I know of, which doesn't say too much, that is for 4 players. Yeah.
Yeah.
So great game. And last point on this year actually. So after 15 years, the same designer Bob Kalinowski has, or it has been released also by GMT Games, is Clash of Sovereigns, which is on the War of the Austrian Succession, which happened 15, 16 years before. But I have it here, but I haven't touched it.
Oh, wow. So the first one's called Clash of Monarchs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that game at all. So I'm glad you brought it up. And then I didn't know about the other one either.
Yeah. Again, so many games, so little time.
so many games, but definitely sounds interesting. I have to look it up, even though, and the 10-hour playtime doesn't scare me as someone who will play Twilight Imperium for 12 hours. But if
so exactly,
if the gameplay is interesting and fun, the time doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
So my next game is Brotherhood and Unity from Compass Games. It's came out in 2020. It's designed by Tomislav Sipcik. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly or not. I apologize. But this is a 3-player game, and it can be played with 2, but it's designed as a 3-player game. And it's a card-driven war game that takes place during the Bosnian War from 1992 to 1995, which is kind of a little more modern than a lot of like historical games and war games. But each player plays as, you're going to either play as the Bosniaks, the Serbs, or the Croats. And one of the things that's interesting about this game, because it's like the core thing is like, it has like a point-to-point movement map, like Paths of Glory. And it's like a lot of area control is kind of what you're doing here. But the cool thing, or the interesting thing, is that you kind of, nobody starts isolated. Like you're kind of like, there's no clear border. There's no like slow build up from one corner of the map. And, everybody's sort of like intertwined. And it really makes for an interesting game because you have to like at certain moments like ally with one player versus the other player, and then you have to kind of like decide, sometimes like now I want, need to ally with the other player. So it's a very awesome like 3-player kind of struggle. Each faction is unique and asymmetric, and they have kind of their own goals, and in this game each faction has their own deck of cards. And your military strength in the game kind of fluctuates based on the history. So the Serbs start like superior in like all aspects. Like you start with more cards in hand. I think you have the turn order. Like, so they play around with your hand size for a round for each of the turns of the game. And also like who has turn order priority to kind of simulate history. And again, you have cards in your hand that are events. It can be played for events or ops. And then they also have a thing where like some cards come into play later in the game. But really what you're doing is you're trying to control different spaces on the board. There are like regular spaces, and then there are key spaces. And to control a region, you have to control a certain amount of the regular spaces, and you also need to control all of the key spaces. Then you gain some strategic will, which is kind of like the victory points in this game. And it's representing your will to fight in this war. And each faction has their own strategic will value that will win them the game, like auto victory kind of thing. That's different, kind of based on history. And your strategic will, again, is like when you capture or lose regions. Like when you lose a region, you're going to lose some strategic will. And when you gain it, you're going to gain some. But the other cool thing about this game, like there's a foreign attitude track, so which represents the diplomatic stance of foreign powers like European countries, US, Russia, UN, and like all the actions you're taking during the game, they have like kind of a global effect. And when the foreign attitude track is at a certain level, there are like negative effects. Like sometimes it reduces your movement. There might be NATO airstrikes. And like when it gets to a certain point, like you can lose the game completely. But yeah, I think games designed specifically for 3 players are rare. And like this one does it just really well, while also being like very like historically like representing the history well. It is kind of in your face area control. And the historical topic is unique. And I love that it has asymmetric gameplay and it's not overly complex. And then there's one thing that we didn't realize when we played our first game of it is that at the end of the game, like if you make it through the full, I forget how many turns it is, if you don't control the regions you started with, like your home regions, you lose points. So I ended up winning that first game with a score of like 4 or something because everybody else ended up going negative. Because even though I read that rule, like when we were like mid game, like I was just like, let's go back over, make sure we understand. We all kind of forgot it. And so a lot of people ended up with negative points, which was hilarious. So it's very important to like watch your regions that you're supposed to maintain control of. And another really cool fact about this game that I love is that the designer made a video on YouTube teaching you how to pronounce every area on this map. And I was like, that's so cool. And I actually watched it. I don't think I retained every place, but just like knowing how to say certain places. I don't have the map in front of me right now, so I can't show off what I learned. But I just thought that was awesome for a game where a lot of people won't probably be able to pronounce the locations to like actually teach people how to. So we're not like then pronouncing it incorrectly and getting that stuck in our heads. So anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Have you ever played Brotherhood and Unity, or do you know much about this one?
No, but I had it in hands. It's on my list to purchase, and there is a vessel module. So with a group of people, we will definitely play this rather sooner than later, because also, the playing time is fairly short for CDG. It's not that complex, which is nice, and it's a different topic, a really different topic. And I remember that part here because he, as a European from the 90s, of course, this was in the media daily at that time. And so, I'll definitely play that one.
Yeah, I think it's really well done. And again, like if you have 3 players, like it's just a great option. Of course, there's always like Churchill also and Maria, but this one is right up there in line with those games. Yeah, so that is Brotherhood and Unity. What's your next game?
Next game is, we talked about it briefly, is Washington's War. So from 2010, designer Mark Herman, again designed by GMT Games, German edition by Spielworxx. So first game by Spielworxx. Player count is 2, and we mentioned this earlier. It's a re-implementation, redesign of We the People, and it's American colonists versus England, and it's a political and military game. It's a lot about hearts and minds. You have to win the majority of people in the various states in the US. Or in the forming colonies, in the forming states. And you draw from a single shared deck. Complexity is fairly low. What Mark did differently in Washington's War than in We the People was We the People still had a mini game for combat resolution, for battles. So if there was a battle to happen in We the People, you draw a small deck of cards, of combat cards, and you played out that battle. Took a couple of minutes and wasn't that satisfactory, in my opinion, at least. And I think Mark Simonich did it also for Hannibal, a pretty early other CDG. But here, Mark got rid of it. It's more a traditional affair. You roll a die, look up the results on a table. Of course, cards can modify this, but it's a wonderful game, and it also shows you that it's not always that important to have a large professional army if you cannot win the hearts and minds of the people. Could be also very good.
That's so cool.
Mechanic for a Vietnam game. So yeah, because you want to win the hearts and minds. But Washington's War, I can highly recommend.
Yep, I'm already sold, Uli. The more you talk about it, the more I'm like, okay, I definitely need to play this. I think I almost got a copy at some point, but lots of games. But I definitely want to play this one. So jumping to, so I'm a big fan of coin games, and that is how I discovered Volk. And he is another, like, one of my favorite designers. To me, he's just like a brilliant game designer, but he's also such a kind, positive, humble human being, which just like makes me love and appreciate him more. But the next game on my list is Labyrinth, The War on Terror, 2001 to question mark. It was designed in 2010 by Volk and published by GMT Games. It's a 1 to 2 player game. And as its name implies, it's a game about the global war on terror. And it's definitely not a theme that will appeal to everyone, or, which is totally understandable. But if you are looking to like learn about this conflict and, get a better feel for like both sides' motivations, you can definitely learn a lot from this. And the gameplay is fantastic. So it's in the game, one player takes on the role of the U.S. and its allies, and the other player takes on the role of the jihadists. And it's very much like a tense cat and mouse game. The U.S. side is like seeking to kind of improve governance in Muslim countries so that jihadism is cut off at its roots, or at least try to like eliminate extremist fighters that pose, threats. And then on the other hand, the jihadist side is trying to reestablish the Islamic Caliphate, and they want to damage the U.S. so that it basically gets out of the Muslim world completely. So it has a feel similar to Twilight Struggle and maybe a coin game combined, but it's really its own beast. One of the things that makes it a little different from Twilight Struggle is on the map spaces, you're keeping track of a couple things. Like all of the Muslim countries are marked for the quality of their governance, which is important for, it impacts how the U.S. players take operations in the Muslim country spaces. And then you're also keeping track of the country's alignment with the U.S., like either you're an ally, you're neutral, or you're adversary. So you're going to be like juggling these things. The U.S. also is like managing their prestige. There's also a kind of a global war on terror, like stance, like a world posture. So you're comparing the US posture to the world posture. So there are lots of different things you're juggling. When it comes to the card play, one thing that Labyrinth does differently is that instead of playing one card, then your opponent plays one card, you play 2 cards in succession. So that means that, like, hey, if I play a card and it triggers Uli's event, I can at least then follow it up with something else before Uli's turn and kind of like respond to that immediately. So I think that is one thing that's really interesting about this game. And also both sides are completely asymmetric. Again, kind of similar to coin games. When you don't use an event on the card and you use operations, each side has their own like operations kind of depending on what they're trying to accomplish. And I just think it's like an excellent, like tense, like the asymmetric gameplay is awesome. It's a modern warfare topic. Again, not going to be for everyone, but it's a great like learning tool to understand this conflict. And again, it has like the feels of Twilight Struggle and coin games, which I love. And there's also a playdeck app that's really good, so you can play it. Have you played Labyrinth at all?
Yes, I've played it a couple of times several years ago, and yes, I did not think about it here. So because yes, it is a great game, could be easily on my list. So many great games, and let me also confirm, in my opinion, that Volko is a wonderful person, very kind, very intelligent, of course, too. But yeah, so great game plus great designer.
Yes, yes. So that was Labyrinth, The War on Terror, 2001 to question mark.
Okay, and my next game is I cheated, Candice, because I wanted to have 6 games here, and
Nice.
so I said, well, it's a combo. Here I stand and Virgin Queen.
Yes.
It designed both by Ed Beach and both published by GMT Games. And Here I Stand is from 2006, and Virgin Queen is from 2012. And both games are for 2 to 6 players. But let me state there's probably even now a solo option.
Wow.
But let me state I think these are 6 player games because, in my opinion at least, you need these different characters at the table. And it will change if you have each player playing 2 countries, nations, powers. Powers is a better word. It will be a different feel. You need 6 different characters, in my opinion, which also means because these are long games, there are shorter scenarios, but you should play the campaign game. It's at least 6 hours, could be 8 hours. So you're playing for a day. But then it's worthwhile. You're not often doing this, but I try to play one of these games every 15, 16, 18 months. And then it's a wonderful experience with the right group of people. So what are you doing? And Here I Stand, it's the wars of the Reformation. So in the early to mid 16th century. And so, of course, it's a time of the Protestants when this movement by Luther and then Calvin in Europe started. And you have one power as a papal states, and they, of course, try to suppress this movement. And what is excellent in both games is that the powers are very asymmetrical. So they do not have the same victory conditions. And actually, the Ottoman power, they are also included. They do not care if in Europe, in the Western part, if they are Catholics or Protestants, they want to fight against and win territory mainly from the Habsburgs. So move on to Vienna and of course, earlier on to Budapest. And that makes the games also so exciting because everybody has their own agenda. Virgin Queen is the Wars of Religion from 1559 to 1598, so a little bit later. And the religious part is a little bit simpler because in Here I Stand in the earlier games, you roll a lot of dice to convert spaces from Catholicism to the Protestant cause or vice versa. This is simpler in Virgin Queen, but it's not a simpler game because here you have marriages. So you try to have your son married to the daughter of a different power to have a nice arrangement. You have cards for this. There are tables for it. There are also in this game, but also in Here I Stand, I think, there are events that could have happened but did not. For example, the Ottomans can build the Suez Canal because they had plans for it. They started it, never completed it. And as we know, the Suez Canal was only completed several hundred years later. But if they manage to do this, then it's a huge achievement and will bring you lots of prestige. And the French player, the French king, is interested in arts. So he try to hire the best artists of the time. And so this is a wonderful game. Yes, there is military, there's politics, there's everything. Huge game, large amount of fun. So wonderful experience. And speaking about wonderful designers, it's not only Volko, but I had the pleasure to play once Virgin Queen with Ed Beach and his son, and also
Awesome.
great people. Yeah.
Awesome. I am so glad you brought this up, Uli, because I still haven't played Here I Stand or Virgin Queen. They sit at the top of one of my shelves. But I have a game scheduled next month to play Here I Stand. Finally,
Wow.
I'm doing it the weekend that San Diego History Con East is going to be. Since I couldn't make it out there, I'm not going to be able to make it out there for that. So I was like, I need to play something epic. I have always kind of described Here I Stand as historical TI4. Yeah, I'm like, I'm so here for that like experience, you know? So I'm so pumped to play it. And I'm glad, you know, you have played it and are sharing your experience with it and everything. Cause, ooh, yeah, both of those games. So maybe by the time, you know, at Essen, I'll tell you how it goes when I see you at Essen.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I will ask you.
Yeah, awesome. So so that was Here I Stand and Virgin Queen. My next game is the one game on my list that is not historically based, and that is Hegemony: Lead Your Class to Victory. This is a 2023 release designed by Varnavas Timotheo and Vangelis Bagiatarkis. And it's published by Hegemonic Project Games, which is based in Cyprus. It's a 2 to 4 player game, but either most ideal at 4 or 3. Again, we have asymmetric factions. This is a political economic card-driven game where each player is taking on the role of a socioeconomic group in a fictitious state. So one player is going to be the working class, one player is going to be the middle class, one player is going to be the capitalist class, and one player is going to be the state. And it's very much so based on like actual academic principles. So even though it's not historically based per se, you can learn something by playing it. But yeah, each faction has their own like actions that they can take. Like you have your own deck of cards. When you play a card, you can do whatever the card says. So like an event or whatever the action is on the card, or you can just discard the card and play one of the actions on your personal menu. And everybody's menus are different. You all have different goals, but there's a real interesting kind of push and pull in this game where there's a balance where you almost like have to sort of work together, but you have your own motivations. There's a whole political kind of phase again that always reminds me of TI4 a little bit, where you'll be able to propose bills and vote on bills, and everyone again has kind of their own motivations and the way that they're going to score. And I love asymmetrical gameplay. I think almost every game a lot of these games we're talking about feature not only that they're card-driven games, but they also have asymmetrical gameplay. This theme is just unique also, and I just think it like the way the game plays out, like you could do some like LARPing it a little bit, role playing, and it'll help you understand, you know, no matter where you fall on these like in these socioeconomic groups in real life, it'll kind of help you understand again motivations of different groups, the way this game is designed. So anyway, I backed it. I got my Kickstarter copy. I haven't gotten it to the table yet. It's kind of a beast to teach because, you know, it's like asymmetric games. Yeah. So, but there are a lot of videos out there. I'm sure there's some good how to play videos. But yeah, that's Hegemony: Lead Your Class to Victory. Have you tried that one?
I haven't played it. I haven't played this either. But I saw it being played at Hexacon in May. And people enjoyed it, and the production values are excellent. Looks great on the table. So fantastic production here. So yeah, another game it has to be played. at a certain point list.
Yes,
So
yeah, at a certain
and,
point.
and it's a long list, yeah. But what can you do?
Right.
Um, so my last game then is Empire of the Sun, and it's
Woo!
I'm not sure if it has been released in 2004 and 2005, but there are so many printings, and I think it's still in print, which is quite
Yes.
special for a complex war game. And it's designed by the one and only Mark Herman. I think we mentioned that name before. Published by GMT Games. I think we mentioned that company
Published.
before
Yeah.
too. Player count is 1 to 2. I'm not a solo gamer, so I haven't tried the solo rules, and I think they were only coming into the game in the third or fourth printing. I've played it with 2 people, just as a two-player game. Again, it's asymmetrical, of course, because Japan and the United States and with Great Britain, they have different, totally different aims. What is brilliant in this game, or let's start differently. First, it's a really complex game because the Pacific War is complex. One thing is that the theater of war is huge. And then, of course, it's very different to fight a land war in Burma, for example, than to have a carrier battle at Midway, for example, because, and this shows us again the sheer brilliance of Mark, how you have these different time scales. A carrier battle can be decided in minutes, maybe even seconds, if the planes strike and the carrier sinks. That is an event for a minute. But integrate this into a strategic game. It's not an operational game. Mark did this with Pacific War, first for victory games, and now reissued, I think, last year for GMT games. That is an operational game on the Pacific War. This one is strategic. And also included are all the politics. Of course, there's China with Chiang Kai-shek, with Mao already. You have the Indian movement, and integrating this into one package is amazing. And I'm still not sure how you can achieve this, but only the most creative people are able to do so. That's why I'm not even attempting this. And yeah, and of course, being so, having so different capabilities. So of course, United States is a much stronger power. Um, so Japan does not have to win the whole war. They have to break the will to fight of the United States and Great Britain. And this is done by will or strategic will track. And also this is wonderfully handled. Last sentence here is, if you are playing one of the shorter scenarios, do not start with the 44 scenario, because here the Japanese player, he has to be, he cannot do that much anymore, and he has a strong will to see the end of the game. So, because it's the fun here to play is on the allied player.
So, yeah, I have tried to learn Empire of the Sun multiple times. I feel like it's one of these games where, like, twice a year, I'll try to, like, because there's that small, what is it, Burma? What is that scenario? There's a short scenario where you could kind of learn how
Yeah,
to get started.
there's
I can't think of what it was called. It was in the C3I magazine, but there's
yeah.
a, yeah, I forget what
No,
it's called.
I think
Is it
it's
South?
on the Solomons, but I may be wrong. But I may be wrong. That was, there is a teaching scenario in C3I magazine, but I'm not
Yeah.
certain. Yeah.
I don't recall what it's called, but like it's supposed to like kind of teach you the mechanisms of the game in a more
Mhm.
smaller, shorter, digestible, but like package. But it is a beast. It is a beast
Yes.
of a game. But I'm so fascinated by it, and I can't wait until I actually we'll sit down and play it. I'm planning to attend GMT's Warehouse Weekend in October, so maybe I will find someone there to like hold my hand. Like I'll do my homework too, but like, you know, it is a complex game, but I would love to kind of finally play it because I know it's like awesome.
It is awesome, and yes, an experienced player. It's the individual mechanics are not that complex, but you have land warfare, air warfare, naval warfare. You have politics. You have the various theaters all in one place, and it's one of the earliest. I think so. Maybe I'm wrong. I think so. That one of the earliest CDGs that did not use point-to-point movement or area movement, but hexes. And of course, hex movement makes it much more precise, but it also has its complexities because how fast can a naval squadron move? But how fast is a plane? And again, this time scaling that is also most brilliantly done in Pacific War, the operational group by Mark Herman. This is so complex. And again, that's why I'm a fanboy.
Yeah. Go Mark Herman. Woo. Okay, so that was Empire of the Sun, and my last game is not a Mark Herman game. And I don't know the year it came out, but my pick is a game that I actually have not even finished a complete game of, but it is, of all the games that I'm like think about, it is the one that like next time I can sit down and play something, I want to play this game. I'm excited by so much about it. And that game is Wir sind das Volk. And which translates to "We are the people," which was the slogan by East German demonstrators in 1989. I don't recall what year this came out, but it's designed by Per Sylvester, who created Brian Boru and The King is Dead, and also co-designed with Richard Seville, who designed Maria and Friedrich, which are also bangers. And this is published by Histogame. And it's a 2-player game, but there's an expansion where you could play 2 versus 2, which I own. But, you know, I guess I should just start with finishing the 2-player game, which I actually started with Fred Serval on his channel. He did a teach and play game with me that we have sitting out in Vassal somewhere that we need to finish, Fred. But in Wir sind das Volk, it is a card-driven political strategy game where one player plays as East Germany, the other plays as West Germany, and it basically recreates the history of, you know, divided Germany from the Berlin airlift or Berlin blockade that started in 1948 to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And what I think is like exciting and fascinating to me is a couple things about this game. First of all, it has some like economic elements where you are kind of building infrastructure. It's important to build infrastructure and factories out on the board. So you have like this kind of what looks like a Euro game sort of situation happening on the board. But the hook of the CDG aspect is that instead of having a hand of like 8 cards, you have a display of, I think, like 7 or 8 cards. And then you have 2 cards in hand each. So only 2 cards that are secret. And on your turn, when you play a card, you can either play one of the cards in your hand or you play one of the ones that are face up on the table. And these cards, again, have, you know, there's some that are for East Germany, some that are for West Germany, and then some that are neutral. So it's like you're like having this public display and your decision of, like, do I want to trigger that just so I make sure that Uli does not do that card or does not get access to that card? Or do I go for that thing that I really want and need to do? But I see my opponent sees the same thing I do. And I think that is like just so cool. And also like the flow of the game is such that you play through 4 decades. And each decade is split into 2 like half decades where you'll go through this display of cards and the cards in your hand. But then at the end of the decade, you go through this kind of resolution, which like there are 3 different tracks. You're managing like unrest on the board, all sorts of things. I'm sure you have played this game and you can probably chime in a little more, but I just, there's something that's so exciting to me, like just from that little bit that I've played of it. And just like, I love Per Sylvester. I love Maria too. So like this design duo is just really cool. And I love that you're managing economics and all sorts of like social aspects. And it just feels different. It just feels different.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So first, great designers and great game. And I think, and so I haven't played it recently. We wanted to play it actually at Mallorca, and somebody actually brought it, but so many prototypes, so we did not end playing it. But I think what you mentioned is the most important thing. You do not necessarily need a full hand of cards to have an exciting gameplay experience, because this display of cards, exactly what you said, brings in a different kind of tension to the table. So very well done here, Richard and Per. So really great game. Yeah, economics are included. What I also love is that as the East German player, you do not have to build the Berlin Wall. It has advantages, or not only the Berlin Wall, the whole wall. It has advantages to do so because you're not losing that many people anymore who are fleeing the country. But of course, it is not good for reputation to build this. So you can go into different things, explore different things. So I think very well done. It's also a compact game, which I like.
Oh,
And
yeah. Small box kind of.
yes, and
Yeah.
the playing time is not that long, so also well done. What I haven't played so far, it's somewhere here behind me. It's a 2-on-2
2v2.
version,
Yeah.
or yeah.
Yeah.
Because what I've heard is that it plays very well. I saw it in January at the Matthias Kramer convention. The designer before were playing it, and they enjoyed it because it adds the superpower to the side. So for the GDR player, you have the USSR. For the West Germany, you have the US player. And yeah, first you have to win as a side, but then one of the two players is winning. So
awesome.
that makes it, and it adds up a few more cards, a tableau, but not. It's still not a huge game, and it's still not a 6-hour game. So
yeah.
so fantastic. So great choice here.
I think I'm gonna get this in the weekend soon. I'm just gonna say soon. Like I'm like just talking about it and thinking about this game gets me, re-excited about it. And I need to make time for it.
Yeah. Yeah, again, there's so many good games here.
Yeah, there are. And speaking of, did you want to mention a couple quick honorable mentions?
Yeah, very quickly, and I think I mentioned a few already. No Motherland Without, by then Bullock, the North Korean game. Of course, Twilight Struggle. Then Wilderness War, another game by Volko Ruki, a very good game. Then Unhappy King Charles, the English Civil War. It's also an older game by GMT Games. Designer is Charles Vasey. But I think I may be wrong. So that Phalanx is redoing it, but people can surely check it out. It's a great game.
Yeah. I think that's correct.
Then For the People, another Mark Herman game on the American Civil War, one of the earlier ones. I think that was the last game published by Avalon Hill, but GMT Games has published several editions. It still uses a single deck and still works magnificently. And finally, Pursuit of Glory, which is using the Path of Glory system. I prefer it I think it's even better than Path of Glory, but it comes with more complexity. It's on the Near East and Mediterranean area. And I think it's out of print for a long time, but probably it's on P500. So Pursuit of Glory by Oh, I'm not even sure if it's by Ted Racer. Could be. No, I think it's by a different designer.
Okay.
But people can check it out.
Either way, check it out. Cool. And I have a couple honorable mentions as well. One is I've mentioned it on the podcast at least once before, but Dual Powers Revolution 1917. I think that might be one of my favorite card driven games that fits in that like hour or less time slot. But you also have like Red Flag over Paris, which is excellent.
Yeah.
13 Days, Watergate, all excellent. So kind of bundling those all together as those like hour or less games. Then a game that I've only played once and it ended prematurely because somebody had an auto victory. Successors. I have the beautiful 4th edition from Phalanx. That is like in the vein of Here I Stand, where it's like this epic multiplayer CDG. Where you're vying to be one of or to be Alexander the Great's successor. Again, I've played it once, and that's Richard Berg and Mark Simonich co-design. Verdun 1916 Steel Inferno.
Yes. Oh, yes. I forgot that one.
Yeah.
Great game.
I've only played a couple turns of it, but it's a World War I card-driven game, and it kind of like basically German forces are trying to capture or isolate Verdun. French army is trying to like protect and prevent that. Great components, like you have these like blocks. It's very relatively simple to play.
Yeah.
But again, great tension, amazing art by Jacques Tardy. But anyway, that's one that I've been like dying to revisit. And then the last two I'm going to bundle together as a like that hour to hour and a half sweet spot. And one is Europe Divided by David Thompson. The one of the cool things that does is when you take control of an area, it's like more of a political game. But when you take control of an area, you are getting cards into your deck that are weaker. So there's a whole like as you take over more regions, your deck that you're drawing from gets a little bit weaker, which I think is really interesting. And then it does some other things with like headline cards similar to Twilight Struggle. But again, you could play it in 90 minutes or less, which is awesome. And then Siege of Vienna, is it 1683? I think. That was a capstone game. Robert Dulesky came out about last year, I think. Yep, I think it came out 2020. Yeah, I think that was a Spiel release for capstone games. I thought that was fantastic as well. And it's like a very like both of these games are very accessible and they can be played in like about 90 minutes or less. And they're all very different too, and great components in Siege of Vienna. Really nice done production. It is 1683. But yeah, so those are just a couple honorable mentions. Like we could probably both mention even more games that we love in this genre.
And especially when you were mentioning Verdun or now Siege of Vienna, I totally forgot about these games. But really, they deserve to be mentioned because these are great games. And if you allow me, I would like to point people already on two more games that came to my mind, which aren't out yet. But one is by Skellig, Capstone, and also Spielworxx. It's a Matthias Kramer design. When you were mentioning Watergate, it's Weimar. It's a political game. It's a 4-player CDG. Should be out in October. It's a wonderful long game just for 4 players on the Weimar Republic, but only political. Great game. Matthias Kramer is a great designer and a wonderful person too. And a game, I think there is not even a publisher yet, but people will see it at a certain point. I played it at the Mallorca gathering early this month. It's called Lenin's Death right now. It's a 2-player game like Watergate. One player is Trotsky, the other is Stalin. So, and we try to be the successor. We know that Lenin will die at a certain point, and then we want to be in this, in the new president, dictator, whatever, in the Soviet Union. And it's a very simple game. Playing time is 40 minutes, and it's still not 100% developed. But I can already tell
it's gonna be good.
It will be good. If it's out, whoever publishes it, grab Leonid's Death by Matthias Kramer. It's a great, great game. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for those additional mentions. I will keep them on my radar. And actually, Weimar Republic, I think it's called. I'm very excited about that one. I backed that on Kickstarter. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Well, Uli, it is always such a pleasure to talk to you. And I think this was I'm so glad we picked this topic to talk about because, you have a lot of experience. And also just like as a publisher, you have a different perspective on games, which is really cool to hear. But just as a gamer and a fanatic, like it's cool to hear you share some of the games that you're passionate about and this mechanism of card-driven games. So good.
Yeah.
So thank you for making the time, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you more at Essen.
Yeah, so it was my pleasure. Here, really, I'm passionate. As you said, I'm passionate about this, and I love to talk about this. And Candice, my pleasure, and hopefully meeting or not hopefully if you are coming
we are definitely meeting,
so then we are meeting and I'm already looking forward to that.
Awesome. Thanks, Uli. You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candice Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at boardgamegeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@boardgamegeek.com. Thanks for listening and happy gaming!